no introduction to most of you. And I'm sure that's why we've got such a high number here, because her fame has spread before her. You are in for a fabulous afternoon. She's a wonderful speaker and a wonderful entertainer. So I'll say no more, and over to you, Ceri. Thank you.
Oh dear. Good afternoon. I mean, that introduction has put an awful lot of pressure on me. The only thing I will say, I read the email that Jackie sent out yesterday, and I would just like to mention two things. She mentioned myself as a founder member and the museum opening in 1972. I was still in school. And the other thing is, you think I'm from Porthcawl, and I'm not. I'm from Bridgend. I'm a Bridgend girl. This lady in the front here, Glenys, I've got to tell you, it's a bit of history of Bridgend now. Glenys Davis here. She knew my mum. Yes. And my mum used to babysit you, didn't she?
She took me to school.
She took you to school, yeah? Because my mum, I was brought up in Sunnyside Road, and you lived in what we know as the Pink House.
Yeah.
That's right. So, and Glenys's daughter, Judith, I played hockey with, and she's outside somewhere. See, Bridgend. Right, I won't bore you with that anymore. Right, well, I married a Porthcawl boy, and that's why I'm here. Right, why am I in this place? That's another story, and we can thank a Mr. Gwyn Petty for that. Yeah. But we'll get there. Right, the police station. We did a bit of it, well, it was Paul, it was, her husband. He did a bit of research, because he's a building inspector before he retired, and he has a great love of this building. And he did a lot of research into how it developed. And that's how this talk has developed. Because you are looking at that police station today, that building today, and you think it was always like that, possibly. You know it's not. Well, it certainly wasn't. And we're going to go through its development and its transformation into what it is today. You're going to have a little bit of history of Porthcawl as well. Possibly things you already know. Hopefully some things you don't know. I don't know what I'm going to say, you know that. I don't have a note. So we'll start. Now it all starts with this chap here. I don't know if you know him. He's Captain Charles Napier. He is the first Chief Constable of the Glamorgan Constabulary. And he was confirmed in this position on the 11th of August 1841 at Pyle, in Pyle Inn. Now, the Metropolitan Police Force had only just been established as a proper, not the Bow Street Runners now, as a police force in 1835. So Glamorgan was pretty soon afterwards. It was only 6 years. And there was an advert for this position by the Home Secretary, the Home Office, and he'd been in the army. And he obviously had come home, and he applied, he got the job, and he made 4 areas. He split Glamorgan up into 4 areas with 4 superintendents. And that was Newbridge, Merthyr, Cowbridge and Ogmore, and Swansea. And each one had a superintendent. And their first police headquarters was the old town hall in Bridgend. Now that's not the town hall that many of us remember. That town hall is the one that would have been in Wyndham Street, Market Street, yeah? It's not that one. This town hall was near Norton Street. And it demolished, you wouldn't remember it anyways, don't even try. They demolished it in 1870. But, no, you try, yeah? Now, where was that? So, that's where the police started, 1841. Now, where was that in Porthcawl? Now, where did that put us? Well, as you know, before the constabulary, there was usually militia. It was usually the law enforcement was by the army, the military, yeah? Well, after this poor guy, he had 4 superintendents for the whole of Glamorgan, as I just explained, and 34 constables. Only 34 for the whole of the county. So some of it was still a bit like Dodge City, They had the odd enforcer coming down from somewhere else. Now, it looks like Porthcawl did have some sort of keeper of the law. That's all I can say. It wasn't called constable, but it's in Slate's directory or Slate's directory, Slater's directory, something like that. They mention a constable as wandering around this place somewhere. They think he was established in Newton, because Newton and Nottage both had police stations. I say police stations, police houses, you could say, before Porthcawl, right? Because they were established longer. They already had an established community. Porthcawl, remember, you only found that out this week, which is really exciting. The document, the Act of Parliament that gave the Dyffryn Llynni Porthcawl Railway permission to build their railway to this place called Porthcawl Point was the 10th of June, 1825. So Porthcawl is going to be 200 years old in 2025. So that's something to think on. But, so 1825, they'd given the actual permission. They had built it, and the first ship, had gone, not ship even, but yeah, boat, had gone in there by 1829. So Porthcawl was getting to grow. Now, just remember, it was Newton Nottage, scrubland, fields, nothing. But by 1835, 1841, the community was growing. And by 1848, Porthcawl was officially named on a document as Porthcawl. So it's 1848. So the whole of our community is starting to grow. Now, by 1876, we got big problems. So being a seaport, as you can see, drunken squalls and other intolerable disturbances constantly occur here. A police station is sadly needed.
Nothing changes.
Nothing changes, no. I know, we're still looking. The population in Porthcawl this time would be about 400. Now, it's not counting Nottage and Newton, right? I'm not counting them. It's about 400 here. And they want a police station. We're 20,000 now. Yeah. Say no more. Right. Now, to back that up, I found this. Could you think, well, how bad was it? You're going to have to listen to this, I'm afraid. After petty sessions on Saturday, before the Reverend Knight, of course we all know Lord of the Manor, a sailor named Adolphus Minson, belonging to the ship C.F. Eaton, now in Porthcawl Dock, was charged with assaulting P.C. Prothero. Now, P.C. Prothero, before we carry on any further, had to be about 5'10", nearly 6 foot. Because they used to be, they would have been in the army, and that is the height they would have been. So, but P.C. Prothero, I know, was born in Nice, and spent most of the weekends in Nice, and came over here. His family still lived in Nice, and he came back and forth. And they think that he stayed in the back of a pub in Porthcawl. Now, it could be the Knights Arms, it could be the Anchor, that used to be there, because there was no police station. But he was appointed here in 1876 to start looking after this area. That said in May, this is July. So P.C. Prothero is here. The constable saw the prisoner on Saturday night about 10:30, leading a mob of about 100 in number, and mostly sailors, towards the dock. When they got to Henry Clatworthy's house, I don't realize, I'm sorry, but the husband of this is the problem. He was the husband of a woman who gave evidence in a coal stealing case. His wife, in other words, told P.C. Prothero she'd seen a sailor nicking a coal, right? So they weren't happy about this. They forced in the windows of Henry Clatworthy's house, whilst the inmates were in bed, and threw in stones, some of which struck the children and damaged the furniture. So there's 100 people now going nuts in this town. So, and it's not, was it Saturday night? I think it was, yes. Anyway, P.C. Prothero interfered, I love that, but was soon obliged to take refuge behind some trucks to escape being struck by the stones thrown by Mitson. He threatened to take him into custody, but the mob, on hearing this, gave the constable to do so. The prisoner incited the mob to kill the policeman, but they at length went away. He's a bit like Wyatt Earp, isn't he? I'll be honest. Now this is what I love. What a man. P.C. Prothero states that he could not get any assistance as the dockmen were afraid to interfere. So he came back out, went on board the ship, he apprehended Minson on his ship. He didn't give in, he went back on and got this guy. He did not know any others in the mob, but most of them were sailors who had come from Swansea. Say no more! So there you are. So this one guy was running this town, right? P.C. Prothero. And there's the dock, just for you to remember what it looked like. And about 1876, 1880, about 700 ships a year were going in and out of this dock. And they were going mostly to the France and Spain, to the other side of our Bristol Channel, but some actually went to Chile and further afield. The trouble was, of course, as you know, they came back with ballast. They were taking the coal out and the iron ore out, but they weren't bringing anything back. And that ballast, by the way, was always emptied out at the north end of the dock, which today is Griffin Park and the fairground. And that was flattened, going off now, see. That was flattened at the end of the First World War by German prisoners of war. Because the dock had shut, you see, in 1906, but there was still this mound of stuff, ballast. Anyway, there's the dock, 1876. Now then, we got to do something about this. Don't bother to give yourself a headache. I'll explain that in a minute. Mary Brogden. You've all heard of Mary Brogden. She thought, oh, poor town, isn't it? Now, you do know, don't you, girls, that it's her money that they mortgaged to build this town. James, oh yeah, James's name was on everything, but it was her money. And she owned that piece of land. And she now, with a cry for police station, gave that piece of land to the Glamorgan Constabulary. In 1879, they asked for an architect, John Pritchard of Cardiff, who was the same architect that did the Bridgend one as well, produced this. Now, Paul assures me that I'm sure a lot of you know, when an architect does a plan, it never quite turns out the way the plan started. But that is the first ever plan. As I said, it's only there to see. Some of it you'll understand, but I wouldn't bother me. Right, and then they offered it out to the contractor to build it. And that was in July of 1880. Now, the contractor, they put out to tender. Obviously, the contractor got it, got the job. How long do you think it took him to build it? Now, think of today, we're looking at scaffolding for weeks and years and 10 months. It took them 10 months to build what they saw as their police station, which I say is not as big as it is today. Right, what did it look like then? Well, here's the first plan. Right, you're going to have to imagine now 2 cells. We got 3 now, yeah, that's obviously. Sergeant's quarters is where our Victorian costume room is today. Yeah, and the trench. Nothing here. Open space with a wall. They grew their vegetables there and their flowers. The police, right? Now, what tended to happen, the sergeant's quarters were there, I think the kitchen, that was the larder, that was the pantry, that was the kitchen, I think, that was the dining room, and that was what they call the parlour, I think, And upstairs were the bedrooms of the sergeant's quarters. Now, they were always there, so the Art Society are in the oldest part of the building upstairs, right? And unfortunately, the roof is leaking dreadfully at the moment, so we're waiting for BCBC to do something about it, because it is the oldest part of the building, apart from the cell. Now, here's the doorway. You've got 2 cells, and above there was 1 bathroom and 1 bedroom. Who do you think was the first sergeant? Brother Rowe. Well done, Tom Millett. You can have the first, you could be the first sergeant, and he came and he brought his family from Neath, and they lived there. Now, he was the first sergeant until 1890, well, the next census, I can't even say when he left, but the next census in 1891 is a William Williams, and he's got his family here. But we have a lodger living in the bedroom upstairs, a William Driver. Now, that is the only lodger that's ever mentioned in any census in this police station. Because it seems that throughout its life, policemen did live in the bedrooms, did sleep in the bedrooms upstairs, but they used them for night shift. It was like the firemen do today. You know, they go down, they're doing a job, and they sleep there. I don't think they actually lived in these bedrooms. They just used them as accommodation. Right, now, that's the first part of this building. Well, what did John Street look like at this time? Oh, there it is. Now, there's that first, it's hard for me to do this because you can't see it. There's that first bit of building. Paul says that's a gable. Am I right? Got gable, yeah? And there's that wall I was telling you about. Now, there's no toilet there now. Somebody said, where's the toilets? They were built in 1924, so forget them for a minute. Right, so there's the first part there. Oh, you can see Comley's restaurant there. Temperance. There we are, there's Porthcawl Hotel. There we are, the ship stores. Now, what you can see in this picture, there's very few buildings after that way, towards South Road. Very, very few. What you see is what there was. There's a few this way, but there wasn't many that way. Okay, right. So there's the first part of the building. Right, we move on now. The second bit. And you can now see that this garden has now been filled in, right? It becomes the tourist information, doesn't it, eventually? And it's our RAF room now, and World War II room now. So this now is about 1890, 1891. This is when William Williams and his family move in here, and we got PC Driver upstairs. And here's the garden here. Now you can see which bit hasn't been built yet. We haven't got a third cell, right? We haven't got the RAF room. What am I talking about? We've only got the World War II room. That's right. Okay, so what did it look? We got the courtyard. Yes, the prisoners had to go for a walk around there. Right. Next one. Now then, we move on. There's now the gable. There's another gable. So it's built. And here is that little bit of wall that's left, that garden. Right, so that's about 1905. Now I want you to look at this here. What is it? Telegraph pole. Telephone, right? Telephone. Because that's the post office. That was the first post office in Porthcawl. The police station's there. The post office is here. The police station isn't on the telephone exchange. Anybody want, now there were some very well-off people in Nottage, of course, who, if they wanted, would ring for some assistance from the police station, ring the post office, a little man had to run down, then a policeman had to run back, and then get on and do his job. How long, now this is 1905, in 1900 there was a telephone exchange there. When do you think the police station was finally put on the telephone exchange? No, not that bad. 1922. Up until 1922, they couldn't ring out. People could ring in. That got a bit better. But they couldn't drink. I don't know how that works. Don't even ask. But there we go. That day, telephone exchange. What else is there? Oh, now then, crimes in Porthcawl. Right, we don't remember now. We have the dock. The dock is shut now. Dock's gone. With the dock goes quite half the population. We had about 1,500 people living in Porthcawl by about 1900. It had dropped to about 1,000 by this time because the work had gone, see, the employment had gone. Now I'm glad you're sitting down, and this might shock you, but in 1894 our Porthcawl Town Council was formed. And they had a wonderful idea. The dock is gone. We must do something to make this town vibrant again. We will turn it into a seaside town. And they asked people if they would would they give up a room in their house every summer for a visitor. So it was almost like the start of bed and breakfast. And they paid the people to do it. They encouraged them to do it. And then you had hotels being built. You had the Pier Hotel. You had, well, the Porthcawl Hotel had already been there, but the Esplanade Hotel had been built in the 1890s as houses. But they thought, oh, we turned it into a hotel. See how it goes. Well, they never looked back till we got the bottle back. But there we are. So the town now was growing. So what were the crimes now then? Well, I'm afraid we're now spreading. We're going into Northgate and to Newton. And we've got the town. Speeding was one. In 1912, the miles per hour was 10 miles an hour in John Street. And cars had started to come in by this time, even if your horse went back. It was still 10 miles an hour. And the police were having a bit of trouble with this. And one spot on the council said, well, it's quite simple to me, he said. You just stand in the middle of the road and put your hand up. Well, that didn't go down too well. So they had to do something about it. Another crime was sheep stealing. That must have been Nottage. Right. Drunkenness around the Knights Arms, well, nothing changed there. It went from drunkenness to drugs by the 1970s, didn't it? It was basically drownings, of course. There were drownings. Unfortunately, there were quite a few suicides in the dock, which was very sad. And it was the ordinary stealing, so it was local fighting. But I love the one swearing. One night in the cell for swearing. Maybe no kid in school then. Right. Okay, move on. Right, yeah, there's another picture of 1905. Can you see the museum there? There it is. There it is. There's the police station there. Yeah? And you're looking the other way now. The Marine Hotel, by the way, was owned by R.E. Jones. I don't know if you R.E. Jones. He also owned the Angel Hotel in Cardiff, I believe, and a big hotel in Swansea. For his time, a millionaire. Yeah, R.E. Jones, yeah. And he was the chairman of the council, I think, in 1917, something like that. Right, okay. So there's John Street. I love the way they all stand, don't I? Okay. Now then, we go on to the First World War. Now this, you've seen this, I'm sure, quite often, this photograph, because here, these men had their photograph taken before they left to join the Welsh Guards. The sergeant sitting in the front, in the middle, Sergeant Thomas Jenkins, he's the sergeant now. He came to Porthcawl in 1897. He had been in the Lancers during the Indian War and had joined the police force and eventually ended up in Porthcawl. He was here until he retired in 1921. And as you can see, he died in 1927. But he was a real character in this town. Sergeant Jenkins told me to behave yourself. You behave yourself. You know, no messing. But these other 5 men, they worked out of Newton and Nottage as well as Porthcawl. And when the war came, as I said, they joined the Welsh Guards on the 1st of March 1915, because that's when the Welsh Guards was formed. And off they went. And it's a pretty sad story, I'm afraid, as you can imagine, First World War. That's David Grant. He died in the Battle of Loos in September of 15. Right, that's William Thomas. He lost his legs and died from blood in Ypres in 1917. David Hayes survived. Richardson survived. P.C. Trott had his stomach sort of blown apart, but survived in 1917. Came back to Porthcawl, married his sweetheart from Newton, Amy Williams, was on duty on the 11th of the 11th, 1918, had caught Spanish flu, and died in our police station at 7:15 that morning, on the 11th of the 11th, 1918. So this town is in a very strange situation. I hope you've noticed the balcony above the spa. Because they all go where? Because everybody walks with their heads down, don't they? Well, there's a balcony above the spa. And where that balcony is, was, at this time, the council offices. And they could not announce the official end of the war until they had announced the death of P.C. Trott. So this town must have had a minute's silence. I mean, I don't know, but they must have had a minute's thought before they gave some sort of celebration. Because they must have just taken the, you know, the guilt off it, didn't it, right? So there we are. Now, so there's the 6. Now, there were 6, as you can see, by 1914. Now, I better move on with this one, I think. Oh, yeah, this chap. Oh, I love this one. This is James Stanley Miles. Now, we found these photographs in our archives upstairs. And he obviously loves his photo to be taken this time. There's nobody else, just him. There he is, there he is, there he is. We don't know who he is. Anyway, we asked the South Wales Police if they could help us to identify him, because we didn't know who it was at all. But you can identify him by the number on his collar. Anyway, he is James Stanley Miles. And he's down in the Glamorgan, in the South Wales Archives, as joining the police in 1919 and retiring in 1945. Well, we know he was in Porthcawl in 13 and 14. And they didn't know that. So, yeah, we got one for us. But there he is, James Stanley Miles. Right, let's move on. Oh, early crimes, I told you about these. A couple of them you're going to love. Nottage dairyman's cows stray into Newton Highway. Fine 10 shillings. Sundays at Porthcawl. Now, you remember and you know that the Great Religious Revival was 1904. So the churches were busting throughout the valleys. I mean, people, my father, I mean, he's 100 this year, by the way, my dad. He remembers in the 20s and the 30s, the churches were chock-a-block full. Well, in Porthcawl, there was trouble because they had to send police in here on a Sunday to stop the drunkenness. I don't know, and that's 1910. That's only 6 years after the revival. Right, as you can see, speeding motorists, I told you about that. Or the child murder, that's very sad. A waitress in the Esplanade Hotel was with child, if you know what I mean. And she went onto the rocks and gave birth to this child. And the child, she left it on the rocks, you see. And because she'd hidden it, you know what I mean? And anyway, they found out it was her and they arrested her with murder, which is a terribly sad thing to happen. That's right, indeed. You know, she was only 15, I think. It's still wrong, but you know. Right, okay. Now then, what happened between the wars? We've connected. We're connected now, fully connected to the exchange. Now the most incredible thing is 1922, Inspector Rhys Davis arrived. We have an inspector. That's why we were given a phone. Because we now qualified. And by 1939, 15 policemen were working Porthcawl, not into Newton. 15! My gosh! Do you know, by the time it shut in 1972, there were 39 policemen. That's why it closed. Because it became unfit for purpose. It was too small. It's too big now, right? Anyway, now, added. Right, here we go. Now, between the wars, you can see the building now has grown into what we practically know today. Yep, you've got the garden there downstairs. Here we are, three cells. We've got the downstairs. The only bit that's missing now is the flat roof, the kitchen. And the 1920s, 30s room it is now. You know, the flat roof bit. That, we think, was put in just after the Second World War. 1930, sorry, I got to show, there's the picture of the place, 1920, sorry, I just want to show you, there it is again. And you can see how Porthcawl now is really growing, it's vibrant, isn't it? Once again, I have to reference my dad, because my grandmother and grandfather came to live in Porthcawl in 1936. Dad stayed in Rhondda to finish his education before he came down, but he remembered, because he then went to war, so he was hardly in Porthcawl, but he said, 70,000 people a year came in by train to Porthcawl in the 30s. He said, my grandmother had them sleeping on the floor because she ran a bed and breakfast. She had them sleeping on the floor, they'd take anything. There were so many people here. So they took the railway away. Right, okay. Okay, right, let's go on. Now, I know it's a very poor photograph, but I just want to show you the toilets, our building, no flat roof yet. Because what they did, they then put a gable on that end and added the flat roof. The kitchens that we talk about now, right? Okay. Oh, 1939, I put this in this census, by the way, got a story. An Inspector Ewart Evans came from Cardiff in the beginning of 1939 to take up his position in Porthcawl. He had a terrible job with Porthcawl parking. The cars were everywhere. There was just nowhere for people to park. So he left and went back to Cardiff. But I've got this like this, because I just thought you'd like to see this, because I found this quite interesting. There's the policeman that's assigned to the police station, although, as I say, they must have been there on the day they did the census, yeah? But I love this one. Next door to us is Edward Pierce and Mary Pierce, boot dealers. That's Walters.
Yeah.
So Walters obviously took over from the Pierces. Okay. And then the other thing I'd like you to just look at is the Brackies, Giacomo and Catherine Bracchi. Cafe, yeah. Teresa Fulgoni was housekeeper to them. He was the cafe proprietor, because you know that Bellissimo is what it is, isn't it? Yeah. Used to be the Central Cafe, which was his. All right, it was a cafe for years. All right, so I just thought a little bit of interest there for you. But once again, there's not much at the bottom of John Street, you know. In fact, if you look here, the other thing I noticed was you had people, private means, that means they lived there. So next to Walters was a private house. Not every property was a shop. And that's 1939. Right. 1940s, the war comes. Special constables move into our building now, because the men themselves obviously have gone to war. And they're all of a certain age, a bit like the people running the museum now, you know. Full of enthusiasm, but you know. And of course the RAF, because we've got the Jennings building and the SE Rescue, and they are helping to run this town as well. Plus the soldiers that go through. So the town is now in a different state. By the way, the actual museum was also used for the British Resistance Organisation. Secretly, it's secret manoeuvres, right? In Margam, apparently, there is an underground, what can you call it, bunker, where they, just like French resistance and the German resistance, you had British resistance, and they were trained secretly. Nobody knew who they were, and they weren't allowed to tell anybody who they were. But they had some of their training in the Porthcawl police station under Major Johnson. But nobody knew about it. We only know about it now. We never knew about it then. So that's, quite interesting. And of course, the one big thing that happened in the Porthcawl police station was the one-night stay of our murderer, Howard Grossley. Now, this is the crowd outside Cardiff Jail. The day is hanged in September of 1945. How did he get to that situation? Well, Howard Grossley murdered his wife, common law wife. His real wife was in Canada. He was a Canadian draft dodger, come to this country. Took up with Lily Griffiths, Vinton Terrace. Don't go there, no. In the lane that goes down to Vinton Terrace is where he shot her. She was pregnant. Yeah, he's a horrible man. I'm giving you the short version here. He shot her, but I have to tell it as it was, she didn't quite die. And somebody came along and they heard this and he didn't mean it. He said it was a German's because it was the same night as the breakout at Iron Farm. The 12th of March, 1945, oh, it was a German. Well, it wasn't, it was it. So, it didn't take the policeman too long to twig. I think, what was the name of the policeman? Lancelot Bailey, I think, was the inspector here at the time. And he took him to our place, where they kept him for 24 hours, and then they sent him to Swansea, where he was tried, and then he was hanged in Cardiff. Right, now that is the end of the story. They go to hang this man, they hanged him, right, and they bury you, don't they, in the grounds of the prison, yeah? Right, let's confirm he is who he is now. Right, any papers? You got papers? No, you got papers? Who is he? He wasn't Howard Grossley. Howard Grossley had died 2 years previously and is buried in Brockwood Cemetery. He took on another man's name. So we don't know who he was, but he was in our police station. Right, now we move on. There's the flat roof. The flat roof has now arrived. There is the complete building. And it's now inspector's quarters, of course. Everybody else lives now, is billeted around the town. Or they've got their own houses in the town. They do not live in that police station. Only the inspector. Okay? Right. And the charge room, this is the charge room. And these are the officers. I don't know if you know a lady, I call her Margaret Hatts. Margaret Roberts, I think her name is, Margaret Hatts. She was one of the clerks there, and she told us all that. Right. Okay, let's move on. And there's a picture of John Street now, which coincides with that building developed. Look at the lovely cars. But can you see, there are cars parked now, both sides of the street. Problem. In 1954, somebody parked his van a metre or a yard, in those days, away from the curb. Held up the traffic for an hour, and there were 6 Cardiff buses in that traffic. And I bet he came whistling along. Anyway, they decided to do this. And I love it. I'm not going to say anything that is in my head. I'm thinking, men, women, would women have done this? But men decided, I know what you do. We'll park on a different side of the street on a different day. On Mondays, we park on the left. On Tuesdays, we park on the right. And one constable's job was to put the sign up on the right side every morning before he started work. I say nothing. It seemed to work. And the other thing is, when I did this, the Jenkin Henry talk, I did a little bit for them. There's Woolworths. And I said, well, when did Woolworths come to Porthcawl? Do you know? And there was a lady there old enough to remember. She said, 1937. I remember it. I said, thank you for that too. But there we are, 1937. Right, so move on. 1970, oh, the 1960s. Who remembers it? I don't remember it, but I remember it. The fairground, now, for those who don't know this, because I didn't know this, being a Jenny girl, there was a big boxing ring. In the summer, they'd have big boxing bouts in the fairground. They were massive. There were thousands of people watching, right? And this particular night, the day, Dick Richardson was fighting Brian London. I'm not sure. I think Dick Richardson must have put Brian London out or something like that. I know Dick Richardson won this bout. Well, for some reason, the crowd didn't agree with this, And they all got in the ring and everything like that. And so the police have come running down, didn't they? Oh, I tell you, in the 1950s as well, there was a PC Brindley Thomas, you're going to love this one, he fined a busker for playing his music and taking money for it. We don't see that, do we? Right. Oh, and there were lots of car chases over the sand dunes, apparently. Right, now we've gone to the 70s, you can see all the lovely cars on the one side. There they go. And there's the last picture of the police, of the building as a police station. Now if you look, there's no raised area out front, and there's no railings. Alright, and it shut in 1972. Because, how do I know that? Because, amazingly, oh, this is what I did. It shut. Anyway, the Ogilvy Borough Council took it on, didn't they? It was Ogilvy Borough Council by 1973, 74. And this was their plan, to turn this bit into tourist and citizen advice. And all these areas were theirs. The museum took over this little bit. And that was through John David, mind, being on the council. And was, you know, if you ever knew it, he was determined, and he didn't get in his way. I did meet him. I still, can't forget. Right. There was grassed area outside. No, it was always grassed. It was a mess, right, till about 8 years ago. And then you got the washer and the store and the boiler. And that's what they planned. And that's what happened. Okay, that's how it went on from 76 through to 2015. We'll get to there now. Right. Anyway, the Porthcawl Museum. That's what we're interested in. Again, amazingly, it's the council that called the meeting for a museum. I'd like to remind them of that. Right, on the 25th of October 1972, it asked for people who were interested in starting a museum to join them at the Grand Pavilion for a meeting. So, the museum, without us, we found this, you see, up in the archives during COVID. We were 50 years old, really, in principle, last year. But we weren't in the place we are now. So, where were we? But, listen to this. Porthcawl Museum Society. This is what it said. This society was formed to encourage the interest of our town. Adults 20p, become a member. Juniors 10p, become a member. Hold your mind, not walk in. That's being a member. They haven't gone up much, it's only £10 now. Please remember, right? Okay. Now, we formed in 1973. And the first museum we had in this town was a pop-up museum in Trinity Church, in their cafe, you know what you call it, that hall? The main hall. What do you call it? The main hall. The main hall. And that's where we were. For 4 years, it was a pop-up museum there. And then in 1977, it moved into where it is now. So even though the museum was wanted in 72, the plans were put down in 76, the museum moved in 77. So that's how long the museum has been in Porthcawl. Now we're going on now, you know the next thing. This is where I could be a founder member now. I'm like, Museum of the Second Age, right? This is 2012. Unfortunately, our founder members, a lot of them had passed away, and there were 4 of us left. I say 4 volunteers, 4 stewards, 4 people actually worked in the place. Gwyn sadly wasn't well enough to do much anymore. Neither was John David, and it was Andrew Hillier, Glenys Davis, Paul and myself. Now I really wasn't that bothered, believe it or not. I was going to be the next Susie Quattro. I had just retired, really. And I wanted to do electric guitar because that's what I love. And I still haven't got to it. And Ron Elliott, I don't know if you remember a man called Ron Elliott, absolutely lovely man. He suddenly died. And he had done the archives on this new computer. And nobody knew how to get into this computer. And Paul, who was vice chairman at this time, now I didn't want to know, I was nowhere near the place, he said, can you help? And Gwyn said, can you help? So I helped. Right, now then, move on, because see what happens. To 2015, and the council wanted us out. We didn't go, you know that story. And in 2015, we signed a lease for a year, only a year, and we had to prove that we could run it, right? And we had to turn ourselves into a charitable incorporated organisation, big words. I had to do big things with the Charities Commission, but this is the state in which we took it on, right? There's the RAF room, that's the flat roof. There's the cells. I mean, absolute, it was in a terrible state. And we only had 3 rooms. The rest of it was terrible. Right. And then, do you remember, there used to be a big wall between us and the tourist information, massive thing. And there they are, knocking through, happy as Larry. Look at them. Men and dirt, they love it. Right, so we moved 2017, we knocked through. By this time now, mind, we put an exhibition in the washroom out the back. We'd already started doing something to the other storeroom. Oh, it was a mess, but you know, more volunteers come on board, members start to come on board, people at Porthcawl, honestly, incredible. Societies, you had the Rotary, you had the Lions, the Christmas swim, the carnival, giving us money. The council gave us £40,000 over 5 years to get rid of the asbestos. That was how much it cost, just the asbestos. To this date, don't forget all our volunteers do their own work. Apart from, we have to get the electricians and plumbers. We can't do those jobs. They have to be done properly, you know, by skilled labour for our insurance. But we've worked it out that we have spent, the people of Porthcawl, members and everyone, and we're, you know, especially events, about £200,000 on that building. I don't know where we got it from, I don't know how we've done it, but we have. And you can tell today, you can tell. And that's the museum today, right? This is the same plan, as you can see, local life, 1920s and 30s. The stuff from there is incredible, because you see this little group that started the museum in 1972 were old Porthcawl families. And then one lady, Nancy Wernham, I never met this lady, but her figure house must have been a museum.
She was the owl lady.
She was the owl lady. Well, the amount of Victorian costumes that we have, we are the second largest costume collection in Wales of an independent museum. We have just taken the first lot out, we're putting more in. We could put them in 5 times. Incredible stuff. And most of it's hers. Honestly, well, not most of it, but a lot of it is. And of course, now we became accredited. In other words, we passed all the professional examinations in 2009, which we have maintained every 4 years. And that's like having an audit every 4 years. It's horrible. But that makes us part of the National Museums of Britain. So we are accredited, and if anything's happening, we are told about it. If there's, you know, anything we can benefit from, if we can borrow something, we get in touch with another museum. Otherwise, we're just a junk shop. I don't want to be rude, but you know, sometimes people forget that. Some people come in, would you like this, lad? It's old. Yeah. I said, so is he. Never mind. Anyway, that's what we've got today. And of course, the outside isn't grass anymore. Oh, we cheeky mind. Do you remember when they were doing the esplanade and doing those green steps, as they call them? You know, what are you doing with your cement? What are you doing with this tarmac? And we found out that tarmac had to do a charitable event every so many years. They had to do something for charity. We've got an idea for you. Right. And they tarmac that were back for us. Not a pen. Absolutely superb. And then we've got the cart. Oh, that was the most incredible thing when the Coast Guard came home. The Coast Guard, what's called Coast Guard, is 100 years old. It had gone from Porthcawl to Ireland, from Ireland back to Porthcawl up at Lochs Common. They asked us back in 2012 if we'd like it, we just started the museum again more or less. We couldn't fit it in. We only had 3 rooms. So it went to Swansea. Then it went from Swansea to the Nantgarrow Archives, which is the National Museum's archives. And we kept beating and beating and beating, and in the end, have it. So we've got it back, and and it's a wonderful piece to see. Right, so that is our museum. That is the building. A little bit about Porthcawl. I think you've had enough of me by now. So thank you.
Are there any questions for Ceri?
Yeah, who should that?
Right. Well, can I, on your behalf? Oh, sorry. There's a hand up.
I'm surprised you haven't mentioned the longest resident of the police station and the museum. The ghost.
Now, I'm of a nervous disposition. And Margaret Hatch told me about that one. I know, Margaret told me. She was, you tell him, Jeff.
You tell it.
No, I mean, and she said she came in. She came in and she just said, I was here one night, finishing up, whatever, and I could hear doors shutting, wasn't it? Or people walking. Yeah, she was in the front, in the office place, the RAF room today, and she thought she went into the corridor, and there was nobody there. And there was nobody in the whole building except her, but there was somebody wandering about, and there was, Now, you're quite right, and this is...
Well, there's a chap who hung himself in the cells.
So they say, I know, well, I didn't know about this. We can't find that. I can't find proof of that. We did find 2 guys who smashed 12 windows in the cells, but I haven't found that. But I will say this. Ever since I've been at that museum, somebody's brought up the ghost. And, there's a ghost up there. There's a ghost up there. Well, when I was left on my own after 2012, I went upstairs to the archives, which was a terrible mess. I mean, it's beautiful, it's getting there. But it was terrible. And I'm not being funny, this is exactly what I did. I stood on the landing upstairs, I said, right, if there's a ghost up here, I need help with all this to do, with all this work. I've never had a problem.
You showed the picture of the London Dick Richardson fight.
Oh, yeah.
Well, as Max Boyce says, I was there.
You were there, yeah?
I was there. Yeah. On somebody's garden roof, looking in because I couldn't afford the fee to watch it. And all this punch-up was going on around the ring.
Yeah.
And the people on the gates panicked. They said, right, get all these people out. So they opened the gates to let people out. But what happened? The people outside rushed in and joined the fight.